Welcome back to another iDoctor UK video. In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the screen on the iPhone XR with detailed step-by-step instructions. The first thing that we need to do is remove the two pentalobe screws from the bottom of the device. I'll then take a single-sided razor blade and create a small opening between the screen and the chassis of the phone. I'll now pry upwards in the gap that I've just created to break the seal between the screen and the chassis, and then taking a plastic guitar pick, insert it a couple of millimeters into the gap you've just created to make a larger gap, enough to slide it up the edges of the phone. Once you've created a gap on one side, work your way around the bottom edge and slide it through to create another gap on the opposite side. There's no need to pry on the top edge. Instead, lift from the bottom of the screen, give the phone a little wiggle and pull upwards like opening a book from the back cover. There might be some of this black adhesive left over, just pull that out of the way as well. Now that we're inside the phone, it can be helpful to put a heavy object like a mug behind the screen to keep it from falling over. Before attempting to remove the screen, it's important to isolate power from the device, so go ahead and remove the 3 tri-wing screws on this L-shaped bracket underneath the cables for the screen. There will be quite a few screws to remove during this repair, so it's important to keep organised using a magnetic mat like this one and laying out the screws in the order that you remove them. Use some tweezers to lift that shield away and store that safely for reinstallation later. Now take a plastic spudger and disconnect the battery connector. We can now unscrew the 2 screws holding down the screen flexors. And again, using the tweezers, lift the shield away. Then use your plastic spudger to disconnect the 2 flex cables. The screen's almost released now, but before we lift it away, we need to release this shield at the top of the phone, which is held down by 3 tri-wing screws and 1 crosshead screw. Use the tweezers again to remove the shield, followed by the spudger to disconnect the flex cable for the ear speaker and front sensors. We can now move the heavy object from behind the screen and pull the screen away from the phone. Before we start getting the new screen ready, we need to first remove any of the old adhesive left behind on the chassis of our phone. Using tweezers, just pull away any of the old adhesive to ensure there's a clean surface for our new seal to stick to. Once all the excess adhesive's been removed, take a small brush, like a toothbrush, and remove any excess dust on the chassis of the phone. Take special care around this front camera area, because any damage to this crystal here may render Face ID useless. Now that the chassis is prepared, we can take a new adhesive seal and install that to the edges of the phone. I always start in the top left corner. Make sure that the left-hand edge is lined up properly, and then the rest of the seal should follow in alignment. Take the spudger and apply pressure to each edge of the device to make sure that it's stuck down properly. And then peel back the top layer of the film, leaving behind this small thin layer around the edges, which we'll remove when it's time to seal up the device. Put the chassis to one side and take the broken screen now. And to ensure that Face ID works after the repair, we need to carefully transfer over this ear speaker and sensor array So start by removing the 3 crosshead screws and finally the single tri-wing screw in the top left. You can now unfold the ear speaker away from the screen and then use tweezers to lift away this small bracket from on top of the ambient light sensor. The sensor's just here is stuck down with some fairly strong adhesive, so it's important to warm up the area before removing it. You can use a hairdryer for this or heat gun, but the aim is just to warm the adhesive a little so that it softens it. Now take your plastic spudger and pry underneath the cables to lift out the proximity sensor, followed by the ambient light sensor, and finally the front microphone. Now that that's released, we can install it onto our new screen. I'll stick a link in the description for where to buy one of these. To start off, removing any of the blue peel on the back of the display, and then begin reversing the steps that we've just taken to remove the sensors and ear speaker, lining up the proximity sensor first, followed by the ambient light sensor, and then sliding into place that small metal bracket. This can be a little bit fiddly, so take your time and get it right. Once that's in place, fold over the ear speaker, lining up the holes with the screw holes on the screen, and then re-secure the 4 screws. Before we reinstall this screen, it's important to note that the iPhone XR has the True Tone feature on it, and the only way to retain that when replacing the screen is by copying the data from the original screen onto the new display. We use one of these True Tone programming machines to copy the data and then paste it onto our new screen. Now that we've transferred that, we can begin reinstalling the screen onto the phone. To do this, offer up the screen flexors to their related positions and ensure that they're lined up above the connector in the right place, and then apply pressure to the connector, ensuring that it seats correctly on there. It can be a little bit fiddly to line up properly, but once you've got the first one in, the rest should line up pretty well. You can place the heavy object behind the screen again to free up one of your hands, then reconnect the ear speaker flex cable to the top, and finally reconnect the battery. We can now begin reinstalling the shields, starting from the bottom with this L-shaped bracket and the 3 tri-wing screws. Then the small bracket for the screen and 2 tri-wing screws. Finally, the top shield can be reinstalled. Just be careful and make sure that you slide the shield underneath this small bracket here. Install the 3 tri-wing screws, followed by the single crosshead screw in the top right of the shield. And now the phone's ready to be sealed up. Before we close the phone, we need to remove that last layer of blue film on the adhesive and then close up the phone. Make sure you peel this last bit of adhesive off. To reinstall the screen into place, start by placing the top of the screen into the top of the phone and then close up the device, squeezing the edges all the way around. The final thing to do is to install the 2 pentalobe screws at the bottom. And then boot the phone using the power button. I'll then check to make sure that True Tone has transferred over correctly. And then also turn down the brightness to its lowest setting, cover up the top ear speaker area, and then uncover it to make sure that the ambient light sensor and proximity sensor work correctly. It's important to also make a test call with the device to make sure that the ear speaker is working. And you can also pick up an app and drag it around the screen to make sure that touch is functioning as it should do. That just about completes this repair. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.